Assalamu alaikum, everyone. We'll just wait for a few viewers to join as we discuss a healthy Ramadan with Dr. Wasim Mir. We'll just wait here a few more minutes. And we're live. So we'll just give it a few seconds whilst a few viewers join. Although we've got a few viewers already. I'll just give it a couple more seconds and we'll get started, inshallah. Okay. So assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We're here today with Dr. Wasim to discuss how to have a healthy Ramadan and make the most and have a safe Ramadan this year in 2021. So Dr. Wasim Mir is joining us today to discuss about practical advice and tips that we can have. So he's a practicing NHS doctor at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. He has been a member of the BIMA, which is the British Islamic Medical Association, and has delivered several talks about how to have a healthy Ramadan previously and at the Abrahamic Foundation. So just before we start, just to kill some time and allow some others to join, we only have less than 2 weeks left till Ramadan, inshallah. And there's lots of things that the Abrahamic Foundation is doing. Today, obviously, is our Healthy Ramadan talk, and hopefully it's a practical, interactive discussion. So you can voice some questions. We've already received a couple of questions already on YouTube, but you can also access us through Facebook, and this video will remain on online. So as I was mentioning, this Ramadan or this year, we have a few activities at the Abrahamic Foundation. One is the Eid card competition. So this deadline is, I believe, on the 12th of April. So those under 16 who want to design an Eid card during the Easter holidays that we have can start creating them now and hand them into the Abrahamic Foundation, or contact us at info@abrahamicfoundation.org.uk. Also, there is a Ramadan gift pack, family pack, which is going around. So Dr. Wasim, you should receive one as well. In this is just some sweets, some snacks, some activities for children to do, and also a sadaqah box where you can donate £2 to £3 every day in that sadaqah box, and those who return it will get a certificate. So our last thing that I want to promote is our talk with Sheikh Akram Nadwi next week. So he'll be talking about reviving Ramadan, and that will be in English and Urdu. So there'll be 2 sessions, and that is Saturday, the 10th of April. So please tune in. We have lots of things taking place during Ramadan as well, hopefully online. So without further ado, I will hand over to Dr. Wasim, and he can begin his talk about healthy Ramadan. Just remember, if you have any questions, do put them into the comments and we'll try and answer those questions. Hopefully they might be answered already during the talk. If not, we'll just interrupt Dr. Wasim if that's okay. Is that all right?
Yeah, that's fine.
I think that's answered. Okay, all over to you.
Okay. Yeah, assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Ali, for having us here on behalf of the Abrahamic Foundation. Always a pleasure to try and have a lively discussion. As I said, today is more about really just provoking some thoughts and trying to tackle together how we can, as a reminder to myself as much as everyone here, how we can make the most of Ramadan, because obviously it's not just about the physical side, fasting, but mainly the spiritual side. And inshallah, if we reach Ramadan, having an accepted and most fulfilling Ramadan, inshallah. So I will be starting the PowerPoint presentation in a minute, so we'll get started. I think a couple of people are still joining. Obviously, you can feel free to watch this talk again at your own leisure. Okay, so if everyone just bears with me for a second while I share my screen.
Yeah, let's go to the next one.
So you should all be able to now see the slideshow. I'm just going to wait till that comes up on YouTube. Yeah, I think that's working by the looks of it. Okay. So Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. As Dr. Ali said, this is a talk called Healthy Ramadan, but it's more geared towards generic health. So we're going to touch upon a few different topics today, inshallah. Some of them are obviously related to food and nutritional advice and so on and so forth. But there's a small section about diabetes and other health conditions, and a little bit about COVID-19 as well, seeing as that's quite a topical thing. And of course, at any point, if you want to ask any questions, put them in the comments box on YouTube. And if you want to, at the end, we can even go through some of the Q&A things about general health advice or anything about COVID-19 as well. So as Mutahir mentioned, I do work locally in the NHS. I work in anesthesia and intensive care, but I've done a lot of work in A&E medicine and also in general practice as well. So before we start, I'd just like to say some special thanks. So this presentation was done slightly differently a few years back, and the project was done mainly through the British Islamic Medical Association, which is a very dynamic organization, mashallah, and leading the way at the moment in terms of health advice to our community and the community at large in the UK. And every year they had this health promotion scheme for Ramadan. It has taken a little bit of a sidetrack this year because of COVID-19. Obviously, they're doing a lot of work mainly towards vaccines, uptake, and improving health in the British Muslim community, and trying to campaign for those people from ethnic minorities. So this presentation is an adapted presentation from what I delivered for them a few years back for the Abrahamic Foundation. But there's also a lot of work being put into it from many specialists in diabetes and general practice as well. So what we hope to talk about today and cover, like I said, it won't last too long, this talk. We don't envisage carrying on long after 7:30, including the Q&A. Obviously, Maghrib time is shortly after that as well. And like I said, if you want to catch up on it, you can watch the YouTube video as well. So we're going to talk about the health benefits of fasting as well, just to remind ourselves of some of the secondary benefits of going through intermittent fasting and fasting in Ramadan. The potential health implications of fasting, because obviously this is not something that most of us are used to in terms of our usual eating routines. I'm going to talk about a few healthy suhoor and iftar diet plans. Some of them may feel a bit strange for people, given our prevalence in the South Asian community, usually in the United Kingdom, but I think it's good to have some ideas thrown out there. And then we're going to talk a little bit about diabetes, because that seems to be something quite prevalent in the Muslim community in the United Kingdom. And many people, even if they're not diabetic, then they can, I'm sure they know about others who have diabetes in their family or friendship circle. And it's something that they could at least impart some advice on. And then, as I said, we'll discuss a little bit about COVID-19, because that seems to obviously impact everyone this year. So just a brief disclaimer, this is a general presentation. It's not intended to be a specific health advice for any particular individual medical problem that a person is experiencing. There are no conflicts of interests in this presentation. It's a very independent project that people are doing from the British Islamic Medical Association. Obviously, any mistakes are from ourselves, and anything good is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We ask for forgiveness if there are any shortcomings from our part. If there are any particular scholarly rulings that you wish to attain in terms of what breaks the fast and what doesn't, I can try and help answer what I can from my own limited knowledge, but we may have a mufti joining us later on for the Akab. And if not, you can always contact your local scholar or mufti who's qualified to address any specific legal Islamic aspects of fasting. Please obviously consult your GP if you've got any specific medical issues. And we must respect, as with all Islamic discourse, that there are differences of opinion in the fiqh schools, and we have to respect that. And also, as mentioned, I'm not a nutritionist or a dietitian. I am an NHS doctor, have been for many years, but I do have a particular interest in health and fitness, and I try and maintain this for myself and my family and community as much as possible. Okay, so why do we fast? That's a good question. So fasting is compulsory. It's a command from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for Muslims. And unless exempted, it's something we're expected to do. Now, the health benefits of fasting are secondary. So our primary objective is obviously to fulfill the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and gain closeness to Him through this means. But there are actually many secondary health benefits, physical and spiritual, that we can gain from fasting in general. And this practice was done as a sunnah by the Prophet ﷺ. Many months he used to fast, in particular the Mondays and Thursdays that many people do throughout the year. The the white days of the month, so the 13th, 14th, and 15th of any Islamic month. And there are also other special days in Dhul Hijjah, Yom al-Arafah, for example, which many can do. So what do we mean by healthy as well? Is healthy just about eating porridge and oats? Not necessarily. So we have to think about it from a holistic and a general lens. What we mean by health can be quite subjective. What I've put on this slide is mainly to get people to think that, you know, it's not just about physically being healthy. It's about using that physical health to attain a spiritual health, which is probably more important and the most important thing. After all, our Ramadan isn't really just about purely abstaining from eating and drinking. It's about gaining closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, gaining maghfirah and forgiveness, and trying to give ourselves as best opportunity as possible to do that. And one of the ways we can do that is by being physically as healthy as possible. So I think we should make a niyyah to have a spiritually healthy Ramadan rather than a purely physically healthy Ramadan, and we can facilitate that with a physically healthy one. So just to recap, what are the health benefits of fasting? So this is an interesting study that was done. It's done in one of the Pakistani Medical Society journals. And I think the take-home message from this, as you can see highlighted in red, are that actually most people tend to put on weight rather than losing weight during Ramadan, which seems to go against what you would think with people fasting for upwards of 16, 17 hours a day. However, it does hit home with some people, and I know from anecdotal experience, many people have said that they do feel like they put on weight during Ramadan. So we can address a few things why that happens, and also discuss a little bit about the biology behind it. So there is evidence, and it's quite widespread evidence now, that short periods of fasting, if properly controlled, can help a number of health conditions and benefits, and help people who are overweight as well. So now they've become quite a popular health trend in recent years. You know, my own workplace, you know, many non-Muslims practice intermittent fasting throughout the week. And not many of them know that Muslims do this anyway as a sort of routine thing. But it seems to be something that's quite trendy in the non-Muslim community as well. And a lot of this was fueled by this 5-2 diet, which many of you may have heard of. It's made famous by Dr. Michael Mosley a few years back. And essentially what it's saying is that you eat normally 5 days a week and then reduce your calories on 2 days a week. Whether he's taken that from our Sunnah prophetic tradition, Allahu A'lam. But we also know that we do practice this on the Mondays and Thursdays as part of our optional Sunnahs. So the benefits in particular are, number one, weight loss. They can improve your cholesterol regulation. They can improve blood pressure control, blood glucose control in the majority of people. Obviously, there's a caveat to patients with diabetes and other comorbidities as well. From a mental and spiritual well-being point of view, they can improve your health. And many people do feel a spiritual buzz, especially towards the end of Ramadan or at the end of a fast. And a lot of people do actually use Ramadan as a method of controlling addictions such as smoking. or even other addictions such as social media and so on and so forth. So, it's something that we can definitely use as a tool. There's no harm in using it as a tool to get rid of sort of bad habits, which we may not be able to do throughout the rest of the year, and use fasting as a sort of means to kind of cut out some of these. So it can be good for your health, but only if it's done correctly. Obviously, it's a long period of not providing nutrition for your body. But one of the things that many people fall into the habit of, and this is a reminder for myself included, is that we do eat in excess. And it sounds quite obvious, but the majority of us won't practice this. It's easy to talk about it now. When it becomes, 8 o'clock in the evening on a long summer's day and you've been working, and so on for most of the day, pretty much all people think about is food or the next plate of food. So that's when the real test comes in. But it's something that we really need to take seriously. And obviously, we've been told many times in our deen and our religion to not excessively eat and drink. So this is something interesting, and it's something which I just wanted to highlight because many people will empathize with this timeline, and it also gives credence to the benefits of fasting and how they can help focus oneself. So in the first couple of days, most people do have to adjust to fasting. It's a very big shock to their routine, and a lot of people don't actually fast throughout the year. So the first couple of days, people will get headaches. They may be a bit irritable. They will obviously feel hungry, and they can feel quite weak. And it's usually around day 3 to day 7 when a detox in the body starts beginning. So your body is now adapting to a period of prolonged fasting. And a process called lipolysis, which is breaking down of fats, starts taking place. The bad breath and the constipation that many people do get should start easing off then. Some of these will happen regardless, because your body's changing its natural cycles. And then interestingly, after a week, the body starts going through a stage of immune regeneration and healing. So there are a lot of now studies which show that many dead cells are cleansed and so on and so forth. And it's usually around 2 to 3 weeks in where people start feeling used to fasting, and that coincides with our last 10 days of Ramadan and obviously Laylatul Qadr. So having said that, there are risks of fasting, so it's not a solution for everyone to fast. Obviously, we have exemptions in our deen, so we must be careful as well. And these can be quite serious if they're not mitigated against. So we obviously know that you can get quite dehydrated from fasting, especially in the summer months and with long periods without water. Many people do end up getting quite stressed emotionally as well. And that's an important thing to remember for your loved ones and your family members, to go a bit easy on them, because many people are still doing their day-to-day activities, whether it's childcare, helping around the house, going to work, juggling exams, schoolwork and things like that. So we should always take that into account and give people the benefit of the doubt when they're fasting. Obviously try and exercise patience, but acknowledge that it's not easy when you're fasting. Sleep disruption is another big thing. Now, obviously, if you're in the routine of waking up early anyway for Fajr, waking up and staying up is the most beneficial thing for people. There's a lot of barakah in the time after Fajr. The period of post Fajr is witnessed in the Quran recitation. It's one of the most beneficial for dhikr as well. But many people obviously still struggle having to get up that extra hour early to eat and then struggle to go back to sleep. So I'll mention a couple of things about sleep disruption. And many people do suffer headaches, heartburn, and, as mentioned, constipation as well. There are people more at risk, those people with diabetes, people with asthma and COPD, which is emphysema, people with heart failure are very high risk, and people with kidney disease, infections, acute infections. We will discuss a little bit about COVID because it's quite interesting what the data says about COVID. And obviously those who are pregnant or breastfeeding as well. So at the moment in in Britain, we're obviously heading in towards now the longer days of the year. So we're heading into British summer. Temperatures are obviously going to dip now. I think we're scheduled for some snow next week, so it may not be as hot as it has been in previous years, but we still will have pretty long fasts, 16, 17 hours potentially. So there is increased risk of dehydration, increased risk for certain patients, as mentioned in those categories before. And changing the diet in a small way can put patients at risk. And just to give you an example, when I was working in A&E a few years back, we had a run of about 6 or 7 Muslim patients coming in with kidney stones in agony, in pain, because they were so dehydrated, they just kept getting kidney stones during Ramadan. And they kept fasting as well. So their recovery was impaired because they weren't drinking enough to, mitigate the kidney stones or prevent them in the first place. But once they had the kidney stones, they were encouraged to drink 2 or 3 liters of water minimum a day, and some of them were obviously still trying to fast. But as mentioned, we will mention, if it's prolonging your recovery to fasting, you should be trying to get back to your optimum health to fast properly. This is a graphic from the Diabetes UK website. So it's just basically mentioned some of the things I've talked about before, but it's just to illustrate that a lot of people are at risk, especially after about 8 hours from their last meal, of going into what's called hypoglycemia, which is a very low blood sugar state, and that can cause serious health effects. I like this picture because it just reminds us of what we practice in terms of our portions and our plate sizes. And as you can see, I know there's a mixture of people on the group who are watching who are from a vegan diet background, a plant-based diet background, vegetarian, and so on. And actually, if you look at the meat and potentially dairy portion, it's very, very small compared to the majority, which is fruits, vegetables, bread, rice, potatoes, pasta. And if you look at a standard, Muslim home's iftar meal plate, I guarantee those will probably be inverted in terms of the meat portions. So Sehri is a very important time. Can't emphasize this enough. I've noticed, I do fast throughout the year on Mondays and Thursdays, and I've noticed a big difference when I've missed Sehri to when I haven't missed Sehri, how I perform suhoor, to how I perform during the day at work, and how I manage to get through the day. So it does give you that extra boost. There's a lot of blessings in it. And the Prophet ﷺ did tell us not to leave it. Even if you just have a few sips of water, there's still barakah inside there. So dietitians have recommended, obviously, that you should have a wholesome sehri. You should be high in fiber. It should be slow digesting foods. It's not about having a quick meal to give you a burst of energy for the morning. It's more about giving you something to help you in those later hours, post 8 hours and so on. And obviously drink plenty of water as well. These are some ideas for slow digesting foods. As you can see, things like muesli, bran cereals. Try and avoid processed cereals as much as possible because they contain a lot of refined sugar. Eggs and chicken are still fine. And wholemeal roti or bread if you are going to eat roti, and brown rice as well if you are going to eat rice. And these help for you to just avoid feeling bloated, that the white bread and the white rice and the white pastas will do. And obviously aim adequate hydration, because this helps in getting digestion going and reduces your sort of headaches and dizziness as well. As I said, avoid sugary and fizzy drinks. Avoid tea and coffee if possible. They will cause you to lose more fluids. They do act as diuretics as well. And try and take your suhoor as late as possible, so close to the Fajr time. And there is a misconception that people think if they eat a huge meal with bottles of water, they're going to be fueled for the whole day. It doesn't really work like that. If you have 6 liters of water, all you're going to be doing is spending time in the bathroom for the first few hours. But also another thing, a tip I guess would be to avoid a sort of dry feeling in the mouth. Is try not to leave brushing your teeth as late as possible. Try and have some water after brushing your teeth, because if you just brush your teeth and have some mouthwash, it will leave you with a sort of parched feeling in your mouth as well. So this is just an example of what a good example of a morning would be, which I put together for what I think a good example would be. So someone returns from the Tarawih prayer about midnight, has sips of water during the long prayer, have a little light snack, have some fruits and nuts, just something to keep them going. They pray the Tahajjud prayer or the Qiyam al-Layl, and they can focus throughout that. Obviously, that's a key time during Ramadan. The night prayer is one of the most important, if not the most important times, where you can really gain connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you don't want to waste that at all. So really try and optimize yourself for that period. He then has a wholesome suhoor, or she has a wholesome suhoor around 3:30 in the morning. Not all of those foods, obviously, but just some of them in moderation. He's able to pray Fajr in Jamaat, and then he can pray some Quran afterwards and sleep well. A bad example was they return from their prayers very, very sleepy and still bloated, even from iftar. So they just fall asleep, basically exhausted. And they wake up tired, even with a dry mouth. I think we all know that feeling when you've had a very fried meal or salty meal, and you wake up in the middle of the night very parched, and you just feel like drinking water. So then you overdrink the water to compensate, and then you can't really eat properly after that as well. So then you pray your Fajr or your prayers, and you're still about half asleep, and you're not quite there at your 100%. And then all that's going to happen later on during the day is you're going to be hungry again. You're going to be a bit angry and irritable. So with iftar, the Prophet ﷺ also talked about this, and he would, before offering his Maghrib prayers, he would have some fresh dates. If he wouldn't, he'd take some dry dates, and he'd have some water as well. As I mentioned, this is something I try and do. I have at least 1, maybe 3 dates as soon as the fast opens. Have some water. I have 1 glass of water straight off, and then I'll have another one as well, just to really get my water load up before praying. And then I try not to eat anything before praying Maghrib. And that's, I think, a crucial window. I think people just try and eat too much before the prayer, which isn't really recommended. That's when they start feeling bloated pretty early on. I put a few options there about how you can open your fast and what choice of food you can have. You can really just tailor that to your own realistic diet options, and not everyone can have a handful of nuts every day for their iftar. So all you have to do is try and adapt it to your own household diet. And this is an important point. I would say drink to thirst with water in the sunset hours, rather than trying to anticipate and overload yourself with water. Try and drink so that you're not thirsty at any point during the night. Try and cut down on deep fried foods. Try grilled, baked, steamed, or shallow fried foods. If you've got an air fryer, for example, try and use that. We know that deep fried foods cause indigestion, they cause heartburn, weight gain, and they just make you feel bloated. If you are going to have it, then maybe have it once a week. Obviously people do like to enjoy their food, and that's fine. But if you're going to do it, then maybe just keep it for once a week or something like that, as a treat for the family, rather than doing it every night or every couple of nights. And exercise as well. And this is really important. This is one of the things that I'm quite passionate about, and it's that people shouldn't really stop exercising during Ramadan, obviously, unless it's dangerous for their own health condition. I think it's important that we stay active and keep our muscles and our cardiovascular fitness up, whether that's just walking or whether it's doing your usual routines. I often go for runs, go running during Ramadan, just to keep up my own health and fitness, which I would do anyway outside of Ramadan. And I usually time it to doing just before iftar. And I've never found really that I've had a problem. The only time I've had a problem is when I've done it too early in the day, which I wouldn't advise, because you'll just be thirsty and very fatigued and have headaches throughout the rest of the day. So you can still exercise, but just go at the right time. So again, this is just, I'm going to gloss over this because it's basically just talking about, similar to what I said earlier, try and optimize yourself for the night prayers. don't eat too much before your Maghrib. And you'll find that once you do come back from your Maghrib Salah, after that 15-20 minutes, that now you've got time to think, with a clear head, and you can eat a proper meal rather than scoffing down some samosas or fried food. And as I said, this is the habit that people end up getting into. Obviously, it's a time of year when people want to come together and donate food and give each other food. But if you end up eating, donuts and cakes, you're just going to be quite bloated for the night prayers and the Isha prayers. So in summary for that section, routines are quite ideal. Once our body is adjusted, it does actually become easy. And there is some hikmah and some wisdom in Ramadan being 30 days. And as I mentioned in that timeline before, it seems like after a couple of weeks, we naturally seem to feel like we get used to fasting, and it's not really difficult at all. But we need to stay alert as long as possible, especially through the night. That's where the crux of Ramadan and its benefits are. And don't underestimate having healthy sleep rather than the quantity of sleep. Many people have the false notion that they need a single block of, for example, 8 hours of sleep every day to be, fully topped up on their sleep. But actually, if you look at the science of sleep, and I've had quite a few talks from various sleep experts in my time, because as obviously doctors, we do have a lot of night shift duties, often where we have to be alert throughout the night, but we also have to balance our rest periods and rest during the day, which is a little bit unnatural for the usual sleep patterns of humans in general. And one thing we found, and I found, is that if you just time your sleep appropriately and have proper bursts of sleep, even a short 90-minute nap can really refresh you and make you recharged. So you can sleep at night. It's not a case where you have to stay up every night, all night, but it's more about trying to optimize your sleep as much as possible. Have undisturbed sleep if you can, so you're refreshed. And even if you get a short period during the day where you can, have a 1 or 2 hour nap just to refresh you, and try and keep that focus where the night time is the most important part, to do your prayers, to do your dhikr, and really try and connect with Allah. Just briefly to mention diabetes, because I know there will be a few people with diabetes watching it. I'd recommend going on the Diabetes UK website, and if you Google diabetes in Ramadan, there's plenty of information on there. Obviously, diabetes is very prevalent in our community, in the Muslim community, mainly because a lot of the Muslim community is from a South Asian or Arab background. And we know that 40 or 50 million diabetics worldwide will fast in Ramadan. We know that many people are exempt, so children under the age of puberty. It is very long days at the moment, so I wouldn't force children to fast, especially if they're struggling. It can be quite dangerous for many children to go long periods without water and be dehydrated. The elderly, obviously our elderly, mashallah, are very strong and tough. Many of them will want to fast, so they can fast if they do feel confident. They can do it. However, if someone is extremely elderly and frail, then they are definitely exempt from fasting. Those with chronic diseases, what I mean by chronic is long-term illnesses, so things like kidney disease and kidney failure, people on dialysis and so on, heart failure, and those obviously who lack insight. If you're traveling, if there's a must, obviously at the moment, probably not many people fall into this category. You can fast, it's not that you shouldn't fast, you can still fast if you're traveling. And nothing quite matches up to the fast of Ramadan. It's a fard, wajib fast. So try and do it in its correct time if possible. But you are exempt if you do have to make a journey. And obviously pregnant, breastfeeding, menstruating women. But just to note that they usually have to make these up later on during the year as well. So this is just to say that the fidya is a compensation for not fasting, and those are people who won't be able to make up the fasting later on during the year. The risks, obviously, with diabetics, are they can get low blood sugar. So symptoms to look out for are things like shaking, sweating, blurred vision, tingling of the lips. Some people will feel this anyway, whether they're diabetic or not. So it's important to recognize that you're having somewhat a hypoglycemic episode. and your heart may be racing as well. So if that's happening to you, then just alert someone, whether you're in a medical area or not, so they can just check you over. Your blood sugars are too high, and this can happen to some diabetics. They can be extremely tired. They'll be very thirsty and go to the toilet more often, and this can be quite dangerous, and even life-threatening in some people. So you would recommend seeking medical attention, especially if you're measuring your own blood sugar and you're diabetic and it's persistently high. Then you probably shouldn't be fasting. Remembering, testing your blood sugar doesn't break your fast. So there's a misconception amongst people that just by skin pricking the finger that it breaks their fast, but it's actually better to monitor your blood sugar so that you can control it during the non-fasting hours as well. And if you don't control it as well, then you're at a higher risk of things like blindness, heart disease, and strokes. These are just a few figures that they've recommended. And if your blood sugar is less than 4, for example, or over the 16, or persistently high, then you must, end your fast immediately because it is a danger to your health, and seek some medical attention about your medications. Ultimately, there will be people who have to break their fast for whatever reason. There have been people who have passed out, during a long day of fasting. There are people who have got illnesses or other reasons where they can't fast. Now, I encourage you to think of it in this kind of way that, it boils down to your own personal decision, seeking religious advice and practice, and also medical advice as well to come to a conclusion. So try and visit your doctor prior to Ramadan, or speak to a doctor if possible. It's getting quite late now, but many people can still get some advice. If you are advised by your doctor to not fast, then you should take that advice. Obviously, they're qualified in telling you why you shouldn't fast, and it's better to speak to a Muslim doctor who understands, the importance of Ramadan and fasting as well. And if you're unable to fast, then speak to your local imam if possible, just to make sure that you are doing the right thing Islamically, whether that's paying your fidya or when you should make up your fasts, and if you do have to make up your fasts. And I always recommend people should do some fasting before Ramadan, just so that they can see how capable they are. And this goes for everyone, not just those with health conditions, so they can really hit Ramadan with, the optimum energy, so that you don't have those headaches and that irritability in the first few days and make the most of it. Okay, I won't talk too much about diabetes medication because obviously it's quite a complex area. Many people here aren't diabetic, but in essence, you should be seeking medical advice. Now, COVID-19 is a bit more probably interesting for people, and more applicable for all of us. And there's a lot of work which BIMA, the British Islamic Medical Association, have done recently. And mashallah, they're leading the way on this. A lot of questions we do get are, can people take COVID tests, for example, in Ramadan? And it's likely that many people will need to take COVID tests, whether that's the lateral flow tests or the PCR tests. Often they go in the back of the throat, in the mouth, and the nose. And the overwhelming majority have stated that it doesn't invalidate your fast in Ramadan. So if you do need to take a COVID test, then please, by all means, go and take it. Other people have asked about fasting and COVID vaccinations. Can I take the COVID-19 vaccine while fasting? And this is actually quite the COVID vaccine itself goes into a muscle, usually in the upper arm. So it goes intramuscularly, we call it. And this isn't said to break the fast. And that's quite, again, a majority opinion from people. So again, if you are invited for your COVID vaccine during Ramadan, especially if you're in a risk group, then I would encourage you to take it. It doesn't really make a difference whether you take it in the sunset hours or in the daytime hours, because the after effects of the vaccine usually take a while anyway to come in if you are going to have symptoms post vaccine. And that is where people usually have some kind of precaution, is that if they're going to have side effects from the vaccine, such as fever and feel unwell afterwards, which can happen, and then one should think about whether their symptoms do warrant not fasting. But until then, you can't predict those side effects. So I would still encourage you, if possible, to take the vaccine when you can, because as I said, it's not a majority that do get severe side effects. Obviously, we've been pretty spiritually devoid of our masajid in the last Ramadan in particular. So it would be nice this year, as the mosques are reopening, to be back in the masajid. And the data, which one of the BEMA secretaries, Salman Wakar, recently did a review on, it's been published online, you can look at it if you want, showed that actually there wasn't a peak in infections during Ramadan last year, which many people thought there would be in the Muslim community, for example. And a lot of the data actually showed that it was the same amongst Muslim communities and non-Muslim communities, that just because people were practicing Ramadan and fasting and going to the masajid for some of the prayers didn't actually cause a spike in infections. But that being said, we still need to abide by the rules which have been recommended and the guidance which has been recommended to keep ourselves as safe as possible in the mosques, and also keep ourselves within the legislation. So I'll put a few things on there, and I'll show you the website, which has a lot of good resources which this is taken from. And it's things like avoiding having iftar in the mosque. My local mosque actually has also done this, and they've said they're going to provide just some dates and water. They're not going to take any donations for food. They're not going to have any shared food platters where people can take from. They're going to keep the windows open, even if it's cold. It's much better for ventilation. They're going to advise the elderly or those at risk to pray at home in their qiyam, especially if they haven't had the second vaccine dose, more than 2 weeks ago. And if they had, then that's fine. That's an individual decision, providing they're happy. The imams in the congregation should be wearing masks, obviously, unless they're exempt. Now, one of the things I've noticed in many masajid is that the imams, especially during Jummah khutbahs, don't wear a mask, which is actually the most at-risk time for the congregation, especially those on the front row, because of the proximity and also the aerosol nature of the loud speaking. So if possible, people can still hear even though you're wearing a mask. Obviously, it's difficult for those who are deaf or need to lip read. But there's no point in the whole congregation wearing a mask if the imam isn't wearing a mask as well. And then consideration of the length of Tarawih prayers. So, the 2 or 3 hour Tarawih prayer isn't really going to be potentially not a commonplace this year, from what I've heard many people talking about. And the guidance has recommended, if the risk is to be reduced, then to keep it slightly shorter than usual. And also people to bring their own water bottles and so on, to avoid number one, wastage of plastic, and number two, potential cross-contamination as well. That's the website there. I'll show you a brief screenshot of it later so you can have a look, and I recommend going through it as well. So some take-home messages. We know that there are many benefits to fasting. I would say eat with your mouth, not with your eyes. Something I try to practice as much as possible. No food should be wasted. So, if at the very least, what you should try and do is not waste any of your food. If you do have leftovers, then try and eat them the next day. Don't just keep seeing it as a persistent time to make, large meals. Try and donate to other projects and food banks. Consider that there are people out there who don't have as much options for food as us. There's a lot of international projects going on at the moment where you can donate to, and it just reminds yourself, that other people are less fortunate than us. If you can, it's better to eat together. Prophet ﷺ used to eat with his companions, and I'd highly recommend we eat as a family. But obviously, you got to remember that we shouldn't be inviting neighbours and so on and so forth into our houses with the current recommendations as they are. Something important as well is to keep your goals realistic. Ramadan is a time for us to get closer to Allah. There's a lot of blessing in it. It comes around once a year. We often feel like at the end of Ramadan, we've peaked in our ibadah, our kind of spiritual knowledge and so on and so forth. And then many of us inevitably will feel a dip later on. But if you can try and at least change one thing in this Ramadan to help improve for the rest of the year, then at least you've gained something. trying to attack Ramadan with everything, and going from zero to hero, and trying to really change all aspects of your physical diet, your ibadah routine, and so on and so forth, may not be sustainable. So any changes you make to your diet have to be sustainable in the long term. Otherwise, you'll just rebound after Ramadan. And the same goes to your sort of Quran practice. Trying to incorporate that in your daily routine. Obviously, we all try and want to finish a Quran in Ramadan, but it's also important to incorporate that into your daily reading throughout the rest of the year. These are some of the websites which I mentioned, do have some more information. We're going to go through a few questions and interactive discussion now. I can see there's a lot of activity on the YouTube channel, but I just want to show you before I stop sharing my screen. So this is the website which I was talking about. As you can see, it's the British Islamic Medical Association here. I don't know if you can still see that. But if you go on British IMA, britishima.org, then they have a homepage there, and they have a lot of good question and answer leaflets, whether it's talking about COVID testing, Ramadan safety guidance, fasting and COVID vaccinations, and so on and so forth. And also, if you're interested in joining them as well, it's a free organization, and you can join them as well. Okay, so I'll stop sharing my screen now because that's the end of the PowerPoint. And we're going to some discussion.
That was very interesting, and we got a lot of feedback. Actually, we got a lot of comments, a lot of questions as well. Some of the questions are related, so maybe we've probably answered them in the presentation because they were about plant-based diets. But yeah, that was excellent. I mean, please keep your questions coming, but we'll try and go through one or two now. The first one was something you may have already answered by Laura. Sister Laura, she asked, I would love to know some vegan advice for my first Ramadan. So,
okay.
any tips? Or?
Yeah, so this is quite interesting. I mean, I've just noticed there's quite a few questions around vegan food as well, plant-based food, and yeah, there's a lot more options now available for those people on a plant-based diet, especially in supermarkets around the country, in mainstream supermarkets. Myself, I've actually incorporated a lot more vegan food in my diet in the last few years, having done a bit of reading about it, and tried to cut down on my meat and dairy options. One thing I would say with the vegan diet is a lot of the foods, obviously, I mentioned still count under the vegan sort of family, but it's important to avoid too much processed food, which can still be vegan. So there are a lot of mock meat dishes out there. For example, a lot of vegan burgers and dishes, which are often on the face of it can seem healthy, but may actually contain quite a high caloric value. So just be careful with those. Things like nuts, a lot of people like having as a source of protein, but it's also important to be aware of salt content and feeling quite dry and thirsty afterwards. So increasing your water intake. Fruit, berries, and so on are very good, especially as an iftar option, to sort of substitute a sweet dish. So try and incorporate some kind of blackberries or blueberries as part of your iftar meal, and things like oat milk. Many people have almond milk, soya milk, even if you're going to have your muesli or your cereals at sehri time. There is an article actually in The Guardian which was written a couple of years ago. I think it's called "You Are What You Eat," written by Ramona Ali, which does have some good vegan advice, what she recommends for her iftar. So if you Google The Guardian and vegan Ramadan, you should find the article, and it has quite a lot of links for a vegan Ramadan.
That's a really good resources there. Another question, which is again very plant-based. So, what are the plant-based options? So I think Isa Coles and Mr. Knife asked about how to maintain a healthy plant-based diet, and do we need to eat meat to remain healthy?
Yeah. So meat in and of itself, obviously depends what meat we are talking about. We know that meat was a part of, the Sunnah diet of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. He didn't obviously eat it that much compared to what many people eat in today's age, especially in the modern urbanized Western setting. And the meat he ate was very different to much of the meat that we eat, often in our sort of big cities like Birmingham, London, and so on. So that's something to first bear in mind. Nowadays, obviously, there are a lot of options, as I said, in supermarkets where you can get a nutritional and wholesome diet from a purely plant-based diet. If you are going to switch to a plant-based diet, I'd recommend doing a lot of reading or consulting someone who's got some knowledge in the field of nutrition to make sure that you're not missing out on any vital nutrients. And there are many people who try and revert to sort of extreme diets or drastic changes in their diets without doing that sort of background reading. And they find themselves feeling very fatigued or very weak. And I would say Ramadan is probably not a time to go to extremes in that kind of scenario. If you're going to try something new, try and do it early on. If you are, for example, in Sha'ban or preceding Ramadan, so that when you come to Ramadan, you're able to adapt to the long hours of fasting. And if you are going to have that new plant-based diet, if you are going to eat meat as part of your family meals, then, like I said, meat is still permissible and it's very wholesome for many people. But eating too much of it may make you feel bloated, especially fried foods, fried chicken and so on. So just bear that in mind, especially if you're going for long periods of prayer in the masjid. I'm sure the person next to you doesn't want to be smelling your iftar for the whole night.
And Assalamualaikum, I'd just like to welcome Mufti Liaqat, who's joined us. Hope you can hear us. Can you hear us, Mufti Saab?
Yeah, alhamdulillah.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
So at least we can answer some fiqh questions, because one fiqh question is we're just in time. So just to get started warmed up, there was one question by Sister Zaina. She wants to know if she can have the lateral flow test, which can make her feel sick during Ramadan. Would you advise her to take it if she needs to? So, Dr. Wasim, do you want to tell us what the lateral flow test is first, before, or any test that we do for COVID?
So yeah, the lateral flow test, it can either be a nasal or an oral test. It does cause a little bit of a gag during there. I mean, I don't know if the sister has it for her workplace as a compulsory thing from her work.
Schools are having it now as well, aren't they? So,
yeah, I guess, yeah. So a lot of school children will have this. So I guess that's an important thing to discuss. I mean, a lot of people do gag, but they don't actually vomit or feel sick. But if the sister is vomiting, then Ustad can give some actual reassurance to her about that.
Yeah, so I mean, normally, according to the Hanafi fiqh, if a person was to deliberately make themselves vomit, then this is something which nullifies the fast. However, in this situation, because it's not for a trivial purpose, it's for a medical reason, then it wouldn't break the fast, even if a person was to vomit. Inshallah.
We had another question about having a sweet dish. Is there an alternative to a sweet dish after a meal which is not refined sugar? So can you think of any dishes that would be suitable?
Yeah, so actually
loads of sweet dishes, but I don't know how much sugar content is in them.
Yeah, maybe some date juice.
Date juice, maybe. I don't know. I mean, I'm not too sure. I mean, you guys have the best knowledge about that. Are you talking about something which is from the days of the Sahaba?
So it's a question from the comments. I'll just try and find it now.
So I think you could obviously have fruit. That's an option if you want to satisfy a sweet taste. And berries and that kind of sweet fruit, to avoid having. I assume they're asking about cakes and things like that, or very sweet sort of Asian food. And if you're going to bake, then you can use things like coconut sugar instead of normal sort of granulated refined sugar, and that doesn't have as much of the sort of dangerous sucrose and refined carbohydrates. So coconut sugar is something that we actually have now in our cakes. It tastes pretty much the same, but it doesn't have the sort of spikes in your sugar that you'll get from a normal sort of refined sugar. And yeah, like many people have fruit after their iftars rather than a sort of massive cup of tea with 2 or 3 spoons of sugar in, and that can often satisfy that sweet taste that you want.
So a lot of the other questions were based around having plant-based diet and maintaining that plant-based diet. I think we've answered probably most of those. And just to go over them, it does include, as you mentioned, beans, nuts, legumes. So all that is allowed, I believe. So that's perfectly healthy. It's very difficult to suddenly go on and change your diet during Ramadan from being a meat eater to a non-meat eater, but it's a test. What about for cyclists? I know Mufti Saab is a keen cyclist. Do you recommend cycling long distances or exercising in a vigorous manner during Ramadan?
I mean, I only started cycling last year, August. So I'm not really sure about how much a person should cycle in Ramadan, especially when a person gets tired and needs to drink a lot of water.
Yeah.
But I normally in Ramadan I do a lot of exercise anyway. So I used to do MMA training, and I used to also play a lot of badminton as well in Ramadan as well. I think the main thing is you can do exercise, but maybe, I mean, I don't know, maybe I from my own personal experience, I normally like to exercise just before iftar, maybe an hour before iftar, because even if I get tired, I can easily just look at the clock and count the minutes down rather than exhausted. And the other thing is, Islamically, there's also this idea of trying to do strenuous activities throughout the day, which are not compulsory, not necessary for you to do, and then it sort of makes you a bit weak throughout the day from being able to fulfill not just your sort of like job, or also being able to maintain the normal things that you'll be able to do, like reading Quran, praying your salat. And it's also come in a hadith where the Prophet ﷺ, in fact, he actually prohibited many people from fasting on Fridays. And the scholars under this hadith say that this was because it was leading to many people that were not able to concentrate and focus in the Jummah. So he weakened them to such an extent. And so the same analogy can be used in fasting as well. And in fact, I don't know if you guys mentioned this early on, but the Prophet ﷺ actually prohibited people from doing sort of like cupping as well in Ramadan if it's going to weaken them. So, removing blood from your body is going to weaken your body. So you weaken your body, and then you need to replenish those nutrients, and then you don't want to be a person who's going to end up eventually missing their tarawih because in the daytime they prioritize their exercise over. So sometimes I think one of the things that a lot of us tend to forget, especially when it comes to healthy eating, is healthy eating is a good thing, but at the same time, if it's going to affect your spirituality, your connection with Allah, then that's not really healthy eating. Right? It's actually compromising the most important thing in a Muslim's life, which is to have a strong connection with Allah. So I think, obviously I'm not an expert in this. If you guys were not here, I'd probably talk more about medicine and my ijtihad in medicine. But I think a lot of people need to look at their own situations. Like someone who's regular in doing exercise, they probably have no problem in Ramadan continuing the exercise. Someone who just thinks to themselves, you know what, Ramadan's coming, I want to lose weight, and they look up all these diet plans and exercise plans, and then that's when they will want to start everything. I think that might not be a good idea for a lot of people.
That's exactly what we said in the presentation, Ustad, that the spiritual element of Ramadan takes precedent over the physical health. The spiritual health is more important, but also, like you said, you got to keep it realistic, and not go into an extreme diet plan just for the sake of it in Ramadan, and try and optimize your ibadah, especially at night time. One interesting thing which I wanted to raise with you was, especially in the medical field, a lot of people have noticed at work, sometimes a lot of people don't even fast during their long shifts and so on. and I've had a lot of discussions with them before. And one of the reasons they say is that they struggle to concentrate at work during the long shifts. But one thing I try and encourage is, if they are going to have those long shifts, is to book annual leave out in Ramadan, so they're not actually working during Ramadan, for example. And it's something I think we can maybe extrapolate or put in our wider society, that if we do have a busy work life or something which we know we're going to struggle with, then instead of booking our holidays outside of Ramadan, let's book them inside of Ramadan, so we can actually, do our fast properly. Because like I said, the fard wajib fasts of Ramadan are much more important than our, for example, our
definitely. I mean, I totally agree with it. I think, and to add to that, I would say as well, this would also be something that would fall under like good intentions as well. So sometimes, you might make an intention to go to sleep early to wake up for Fajr in the morning, and you might think to yourself, well, sleep has nothing to do with Fajr. But the idea is that your intention is something which you really want to try and get close to Allah. And if you are someone who, I know a lot of people who take their annual leave in Ramadan. They book, like, especially the last 2 weeks or the last 10 days, they'll book that, and then they can, focus. And I think that's something which is encouraged. If you can do it, it might be a good idea to be able to try, or maybe even shift around some of the shifts that you have moving around, so that you can get. And ultimately, the month of Ramadan is a month. You can't really kind of gain the benefits of Ramadan outside of Ramadan. Impossible.
Yeah, true.
And so it's that time of the year where you want to really, put all your effort into trying to get close to Allah, whether it's to do with, healthy eating, whether it's to do with family, community, whether it's to do with anything else, personal connection with Allah. This is the month in which you really want to try and change yourself. And I agree with you what you said there. The idea of trying to change your rota or your days of leave, in the month of Ramadan. And Allah is the one that rewards people for their efforts.
We've got another question from Fiddle Leaf Figs. Meat is very processed these days at local butchers. What alternatives are there if we are trying to cut down meat?
You can. There are obviously a lot of other butchers now. You can shop around. There's some online butchers, even if you want to find wholesome or different kind of organic meat. Obviously, you don't have to eat meat if you don't want to. Like I said, there are many other options out there, which we talked about in the slideshow and PowerPoints, sources of protein. And I think there are what I would encourage. Corn you can even eat, but if you do want to eat a wholesome dish, then go to your butcher, inquire about the meat, and eat from one that you trust. Sometimes we've got a family friend who runs an online delivery service for some meat, and we do mainly to support his business, but also we know that they produce it locally in the UK as well. So we usually try and get it from them, and we only order it like once a month in a sort of bulk portion. But it does mean that now we do pay a little bit more, but it just means that we eat it sort of more on a sort of once in a while basis than every day going to the local butcher. And we're also supporting local Muslim business as well.
So, do you got any tips?
No, I mean exactly what you're saying. I mean, there's actually a butcher that we actually order from online. It's a bit expensive, but what we do is we try to order maybe like once a month from there, and then other meat we try to cut down, especially things like chicken. Normally trying to get a good healthy chicken is a bit difficult. So try to cut down on chicken, red meat, certain types of red meats as well. And then I think a lot of people, especially now it's spring, so you're not really going to get cheap spring lamb at the moment. So it's like, I think people don't understand how animals grow and how animals reproduce, and they don't reproduce all the time. They're not supposed to reproduce, 24/7. It's certain times in the year that's naturally supposed to. And then again, maybe it might be a good idea for people to actually come out with some sort of a menu for people, because a lot of people out there, they don't know any better. I mean, they're used to their parents preparing samosas and pakoras and this and that, and then they don't know. I mean, do you have to make 5 dishes for every iftar meal? Do you have to have, sweet dishes? it's just a normal day. I mean, Ramadan's supposed to be a normal day. They're not supposed to be like a special feast. I think the culture has created this thing as though, especially with the commercialism, they really want to try and get into this. So they'll advertise. As soon as you go into a Tesco or Asda, you'll see like Ramadan, right? All these foods you can buy for Ramadan. You're thinking, you know what, I need to buy this because otherwise my Ramadan's not going to be the same. It can be the same if you read about the scholars in the past and the people of the past. You don't hear about the big feast that they used to have. You'll ever rarely hear about them getting together and having a big feast in Ramadan. They just had the normal meal and whatever they used to have. And I think that's maybe something that we need to reintroduce again. Get that culture, get that trend going. Hashtag basics Ramadan. Basic Ramadan. And there's loads of people out there online who actually are producing like these nice menus. It's obviously about how much time do you have as well to prepare a meal. That's another thing. Is it like you just make some samosas, freeze them, and then you just like throw them in the fryer for every iftar? It's a bit easy for a lot of people. Or are you going to take out 2 hours a day, 3 hours a day to come out with a new recipe for the family? Are the family going to like it? So I think there's a lot of challenges that people who usually are in the kitchen quite a lot, I think they have a lot of challenges in Ramadan. That's the ijtihad they have to.
Exactly, like a good reminder, Ustad.
Another common question that we get during Ramadan is about blood tests and maybe this time having the COVID vaccine. So I think you touched on this, Dr. Wasim. What would you recommend?
Yeah, Ustad, I was just saying that the vaccine is intramuscular, isn't it? So it doesn't actually invalidate the fast. But people do often ask about blood tests. They don't want to get the blood test or blood sugar tests for diabetes.
I think when it comes to blood test, if you can have a blood test after Ramadan, then that's obviously ideal. But if it's difficult to be able to get an appointment outside of Ramadan, then obviously take your blood test in Ramadan, and it won't break your fast. And as for the types of vaccine that you're talking about, the one that's taken through the muscle, then those won't break the fast. So intramuscular don't break the fast.
Exactly.
Any questions from yourselves? Or there's another question. Sorry. Is there any way to rewind to watch this from the start? Yes. So for Sister Anisa, after this program ends, I think after about 10-15 minutes, it comes back online again. Is that true? I think that's what happens, isn't it, for YouTube videos? So it should be available. So don't worry. If you've missed it, you can rewind and watch the PowerPoint from Dr. Wasim and the questions that Mufti Saab had answered. Are there any common questions which you face, Mufti Saab, during Ramadan?
In Ramadan, comments or questions related to, you mean health? Or
health
just
and
general Ramadan questions?
I mean, if you want to talk about any general health or any...
I mean, usually to do with the health ones, things like people asking regarding if they've got asthma or they've got any other sort of like medical issues. First of all, ask your doctors, speak to your doctors. And what I always tell people is, make sure if your doctor's not really familiar with Islam or not familiar with the teachings of Islam, try to explain as best as you can to the doctor about what fast is all about and what it means to you. And then see if there's any alternatives that the doctor can give you as well. So sometimes there might be, for example, like some, I don't know, maybe there's some sort of medication that you can take through the muscle injection. Some maybe you can take some certain times in the day, once a day maybe, or twice a day, and then you can ask your doctor what are the optimum times for your fasting, so it coincides with your iftar. So I think these kind of things best to speak to the doctor. And the most important thing that is a priority for all Muslims is your health is more important than anything out there. So a lot of people tend to kind of like, this year there's going to be people out there who are going to have diabetes and they didn't have it last year. They are going to be in two minds. They're going to feel guilty inside that should they fast, should they not fast. My advice, speak to a doctor first of all if you can fast, and if it's going to harm your body. If it's going to harm your body, do not fast. Because this is something the Prophet ﷺ, he in fact told many of the companions as well. There was a companion that was fasting on a journey and he fainted and he told him off. He said, there's no reward in you fasting. in this manner. Yeah, so sometimes it's sunnah also not to fast for some people, right? Just as it's compulsory for many people to fast, it's also for many people it's compulsory not to fast as well. So I think those are kind of things that people should bear in mind.
We just had a flurry of questions. One of them is about exams. So many parents discourage kids from fasting for exams. Is this allowed? That's by Brother Jahangir.
So when it comes to fasting exams, there's no like general answer that's given for this one. It's just similar to circumstances, case by case situation. So what I would say is that look, a lot of people I've spoken to have told me that fasting actually increases the concentration span of a child or a person taking the exam, and it can actually give them more focus as well, right? Whereas generally sometimes parents are very scared about the health of their children, and they assume that continuously eating is better than not eating. So what I would first of all say is anyone who's taking exams, try to organize your eating routine around nighttime, basically. I know it's not very healthy, but just try to set yourselves. And the other thing is, what I've experienced is it's not about how much you eat, it's actually about what you eat. So if you eat the right types of food with the right types of nutrients in there, you actually don't have to eat too much food. Yeah, so you kind of train your body in being able to eat, certain types of food. I don't want to give you kind of my menu away. Yeah, but try to eat certain types of food throughout the day that will keep up your energy, and it will, compensate for what you're not going to eat in the daytime. Right. So that's one thing that you can do. If you kind of exhausted everything, and your child has really told you that, I find it very difficult to fast, then I would say, look, then if that person doesn't fast after you've tried everything, right, then they can do qada, make the fast up. But that's only after they've tried everything. Try fasting before Ramadan. Before Ramadan, maybe ask your child to fast before Ramadan. I'm sure the exams are not going to be throughout Ramadan. It's going to be only in a few days of Ramadan anyway. So sometimes when the person gets trained in fasting, psychologically, you don't want to tell them beforehand, like, you know what, you're not going to fast in Ramadan, because that person is going to think, if I fast, I'm going to do terrible in the exam. And the most important thing that we have to remember as Muslims is that Ramadan is a very important time for tarbiyah as well, to get your children into the habit, the importance of sacrifice, the importance of giving up things for the sake of Allah. And education definitely is a very important thing, especially in our society that we live in. But at the same time, we need to teach our children of how to gain a balance. And if our children see that, look, my parents are so concerned about my fasting and my education, and they're trying to strike a balance, I guarantee that child, when he grows up, is going to always remember that, have those memories, the parents trying to bring them closer to Allah at the same time, with their worldly needs as well.
We've got one more question from sister. What about attending a gynecology appointment? Would this break a fast? So I think...
Yeah, so these kind of issues, it all depends upon the procedure that takes place. So I'll give you the general rule. The general rule is any sort of medication that goes through the cervix, into the cervic area. Any medication that's go into there will break the fast, and you just have to make up another fast for that day. But if there's no specific medication, if it's not like a medication going in, it's just maybe some sort of like instrument that's been inserted or something of that sort, then it won't break the fast.
Sometimes the instrument is lubricated, so will that lubrication break the fast?
I'm not too sure, about this one, because I remember I did speak to some people about this. Like, some argue that this isn't really something which is nourishing the body. It's not nourishing the body, is it?
Yeah, I think one of the scholars I spoke to about this said, because it wasn't the GI tract, it was the vaginal tract, and there wasn't, like you said, nourishment as well, that a lubrication or examination was okay, especially if it was for an important thing.
That sounds fine to me.
I think it's Maghrib time now.
Yeah, it is. I think that's the end of our questions as well. So, Jazakallah khair for Dr. Wasim and Muftasab for participating and answering these questions. And we hope you all have a blessed Ramadan. Just remember, next week we have Sheikh Akram Nadwi coming online, in English and in Urdu, talking about the revival of Ramadan. So a bit about, some of the things that we discussed today in terms of having these 5 dishes, as Ustad mentioned, and do we need to have these sweet dishes afterwards? So a lot will be explored next week. So other than that, Jazakallah khair.
Okay.
Mm.
Assalamu alaikum.